more about scholarships. There's the Autism Scholarship and the Jon Peterson Scholarship. My name's Mary Jo O'Neill. I work at Hickman and Louder with Linda Gorczynski. Linda Gorczynski is the attorney, and I'm the advocate. And we have Hadassah Myers, who is the director at A+ Solution. A+ Solution, fun fact, is Hadassah and I have been working together for probably over 15 years. I have families come to me needing support, and I just say, go call Hadassah. I probably even give him her cell. I'm like, call Hadassah, she'll get the job done. And I never hear from them because they know that Hadassah was able to find the right services for their family at A+ Solution. And then Courtney Evercheck. Courtney is an advocate. She is a supporter, and she understands the Jon Peterson and the Autism Scholarship. Probably it was 5 years ago, I went to a presentation that Courtney presented at, and I sat in the back of the room, and all I kept thinking is this girl knows her stuff. She knows her stuff, and she knows how to help families. And Hadassah, you're lucky to have her because she is amazing. So I'm just gonna let them dive in. They are just gonna dive into the scholarships, help families understand the scholarships. And every now and then, if there's a question, if you want to throw the question, we might not answer it at that moment, at that time, but we will hopefully get that will it last 15 minutes answering your questions. So I hope you're all doing well. I hope you enjoy this information, and go take it on, girls.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody. So nice to see everyone. We thought maybe we should back up a little bit. Everyone knows there are these 2 scholarships now available in Ohio for families who are in private schools or home schools who are eligible for an IEP. But just to give a little bit of a background of what happens at the beginning of the process when you find out that your child is struggling and you want to understand how to help them. What do you need to do first before you can apply for a scholarship? So that's why Courtney Evercheck, who is a school psychologist, is on the call, because she can explain the process that the schools go through, that you as a parent can go through to ensure that your student can access services. So go ahead, Courtney.
Hi, everybody. I'm not sure everybody is in the process here. We're some parents are just starting the process. If some parents are kind of in the middle or at the end of the process, so feel free to, jump in with questions wherever you are in this process. So to be able to get a Jon Peterson Scholarship or an Autism Scholarship, you have to have an IEP, which can only be written by a public school district. So to start that process, there has to be what's first called a referral. So anybody can make the referral. You can make a referral to the school district. Teachers can make a referral. If your children are in non-public school, they can help make the referral. So anybody needs to make the referral to the district. And then once you make that referral, then they set up what's called a planning meeting. And in that planning meeting, they discuss your child and talk about any data that's been collected, interventions that have been done, why you think your child might need an IEP. And they kind of go through this whole process. And then at that meeting, they decide, well, we think a couple things can happen really well. We think, yes, there might be a need for IEP, which means specialized instruction, and they'll go ahead and do the testing. They can also say, you know what, there really isn't enough information here, enough data. Sorry, we don't think so. And then it kind of ends there. Or usually what they say instead of that is say, we need more information. So then they send you back to the school and they say, give us, another 6 weeks or so of more data, do some more interventions, some modifications, accommodations, and come back with more data. And then we'll revisit it again. So let's just say that they said yes, or you're at the meeting, they say, yep, we think there needs to be, a possibility of specialized instruction needs to happen. And so then you go for the testing, and that's called an ETR. And then they collect more data, and that's when testing happens, classroom observations, lots of things go on. And then once all that's collected, then you meet for another meeting, an ETR meeting, team meeting, and it's always a team. It's never like one person. It's always, usually school psychologist, district representative, the parent, teacher. If your child's in a non-public school, you can invite anybody from the non-public school to that meeting. And at that meeting, they determine if there is a disability category that your child qualifies for. Do they need specialized instruction? And then you have to look at adversely affects their educational performance. And then from there, they say, yes, child qualifies, then an IEP is written, which is another meeting. and there are timelines that have to be done, so it is done in an efficient manner. Then at the IEP meeting, the IEP gets written, and then after the IEP is written, then you can apply for the Jon Peterson scholarship or autism scholarship, depending on which category your child would fall under.
Right. And so, yes.
I have a question. When you apply for the Jon Peterson, who are you applying to? How does that look?
Yeah. So what you need to do is you actually, as the parent, cannot apply for the scholarship. What you need to do is you need to find a provider, and the provider, so the agency, school, or provider that you are going to be going through to access the services, that entity is going to apply for the scholarship for you. So basically what that means is you would call someone like me at A+ Solutions, or another service provider, or often a private school that's a provider, and say that your child has been eligible for an IEP. The IEP actually doesn't have to be already written to start applying. It won't get approved until the IEP is written, but you actually can start the process while you're waiting for the IEP. So once you sort of decide which entity is going to be the right fit for you and to service your child, you ask them for an application. Sometimes, like I know when people call me, I'll often email them an application to fill out just to speed up the process, but then we'll usually have a meeting so that we can talk about what the needs are of the child, and logistics, scheduling, all that kind of stuff, just to make sure that we can provide the service. And then the parent will fill out that application, and it's actually a very simple process. It's like a 2-page form to fill out, send it back to the provider with a couple other supporting documents, proof of residency, and a copy of the birth certificate. And then we as the provider would apply for the parent for that scholarship. Then what happens is once the district gets a notification from the ODE, the Ohio Department of Education, saying that this student has applied for the scholarship, the district will review the application and decide if they're going to approve it or not. Now, anyone who's in a private school or a homeschool that's not a chartered homeschool, just either traditional homeschool or a private homeschool, is eligible as long as you have a current IEP or in the process of getting a current IEP. So it's not a needs-based scholarship at all. It's purely for those students who have the academic need. So then the district reviews the application and they approve it. And then once that's approved, the parent and the provider will get a notification that that's been approved. And then a letter will go out to the parent, actually via snail mail, like old fashioned, from the Ohio Department of Education, saying that the student has been awarded the scholarship, and it'll have an amount of like what the scholarship, the budget of the scholarship is going to be for the year. Yes?
I have a question about when you say the district has to approve it. I've never heard that before. That's new to me. And
yeah, I just want to clarify that too, along those lines, Mary Jo, that it's not like a scholarship in the sense of we usually think of scholarships, right? You do a scholarship, you write a 500-word essay, and the top people are awarded the scholarship.
Right.
It says that it uses the term scholarship, but it really isn't. All you need to do to qualify is to have this IEP that's agreed upon and not be in conflict with the district. You can't be in due process or, in some type of a dispute with the district. You're going to get the scholarship. It's not just the top tier.
Right, you're going to get the scholarship, but it is the district that approves the scholarship, which again, it just means they're just checking off all the boxes that you've done the application, that you've provided the proof of residency, all of that stuff, and that you're eligible for the IEP. That's all that approval process consists of. But they are the ones that do give the approval. Okay, so I see a question here. Is this the local school district? So yes, it is. It is the district of residency. So this gets confusing for people because you may, if your child's in a private school, you may be living, let's say, I'm just using an example, let's say live in Shaker Heights, but you send your child to a school in Cleveland Heights. Obviously, you can do that if it's a private school. What happens is the ETR, which is the evaluation team report, is done by the district that the school resides in. So if you're sending your child to a school in Cleveland Heights, Cleveland Heights would be the district that writes the ETR, but then the IEP is written by the district that you reside in. So if you're living in Shaker Heights, then Shaker Heights is going to write the IEP. And sometimes there's confusion, like, along the road with this process. So when you have your ETR, it's very important to know this information, because I think a lot of parents assume that the district of residence is going to get a copy of the ETR and it's going to be an automatic process and they're going to start working on the IEP. And it's not necessarily true, not because they don't want to do it, but because they somehow don't get the information. So the best thing you can do as a parent is, after that ETR meeting, take that ETR and either send it or drop it off at your local school district, so that you know that they have that IEP and that it's, you can start the process.
That is really confusing, Hadassah. And can you say it one more time?
Sure.
And literally use, you live in Shaker and your child's going to Cleveland Heights? Because I think parents need to hear that again, because I still sometimes in my head have to think again, okay, no, wait,
Right.
I live in Shaker and my child goes to Cleveland Heights. Say that
Right.
piece again.
So, just using that same example, if you live in Shaker and your child is going to a school in Cleveland Heights School District is going to write the ETR. They're going to do that evaluation. They're going to collect the data from the school. Then when that's completed, you're going to take that evaluation team report, the ETR, and you're going to give it to your local school district, the school district that you live in, and they are going to write the IEP. Okay, and they're the ones that are going to actually approve the scholarship. And that process happens, the parent doesn't even know that's happening. You just sort of the provider submits everything, and you just wait and you get notification from the ODE. You don't get notification from the district, but that's kind of what's happening behind the scenes.
Now, Courtney talked about categories. We have our 13 categories. Speak to those 13 categories. And is there any value to those 13 categories? Tell me about those 13 categories.
It's actually 5 categories, okay, there's 5 different scholarship amounts based on 5 different categories of disability. So, each.
Well, what I'm speaking to is when they qualify, there's the 13 categories. Then that's interesting. I never looked at it, because if you look at the scale of the finances, it is 5. I never looked at it that way, but there's 13 categories when you qualify for an IEP.
Right, yeah, each of those categories have different criteria to meet to be able to qualify from one of those categories. And then those kind of get, I guess, translated and everything into 5 different
Yeah.
monetary.
I like how you said that, though. There's 13, but Hadassah, you're right. I never like when you look at the financial piece, it's within 5 categories. That's interesting. I'm sorry, keep going.
And what people get confused about is, people assume, and it actually would be logical, but it doesn't really go this way. People assume that the financial amount, the budget for your scholarship is going to be tied to how many goals you have on your IEP, how many services that you need. And it's not really so. It's really based on that category of disability. So, like there's a number for specific learning disability and OHI. So specific learning disability is just like it sounds. If your child has a learning disability, OHI is other health impairments. So if there's an illness or if your child has ADHD or anxiety and that's impacting their learning, the category of disability will be OHI. Those 2 categories, which are pretty common, has the same funding amount. And it really doesn't matter if your child has 1 reading goal on their IEP or 10 different goals on their IEP, they're still going to get that same amount. And it's based on that category of disability.
One thing that I don't want to assume that our listeners don't know is when you're taking the Jon Peterson, you're walking away from the public school.
Yes.
Speak to about how was there a reason why, what is happening that you've got an IEP, you're in a district, and now you've decided to go to a school that is a provider, such as Julie Billiard, such as Lawrence. You've decided to go to that school that's a provider. What have you, speak to Faith.
Okay, so yes, basically when you are choosing to leave your public school, and people do that for all sorts of reasons. I mean, sometimes there's a school that can meet your child's needs more. It might be because you want to send your child to a religious school, or maybe to the private school that your other children attend. I mean, there's millions of reasons why you might want to leave the school district, or maybe you don't think they have a great special education department and you don't think that they're meeting your child's needs. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why you might want to do that. So what you are doing though is you're giving away your right to faith, which is free and appropriate public education. So you are saying that because I'm doing this and I'm going to a private school, or I'm deciding to homeschool my child, the school district, I'm giving up my right for the school district to educate my child for free. And now what I need to do is either, pay for tuition and use the scholarship for services, or you can also use the scholarship for tuition at a private school that's a provider. I mean, there's lots of different ways to use the scholarship, and we can talk about that also. But you are giving up your right to free and appropriate public education.
Hadassah, you just said a great point, because I think this is something that parents don't understand, the nimbleness of the Jon Peterson or the Autism Scholarship. So let's say I've decided to do the majority of my services through Julie Billiard's not a school for my little guy. Lawrence isn't a school for my little guy. Ratner's not a school. Those are schools that take the Jon Peterson. My little guy, that's not a good fit. So I'm going to do homeschool, or I'm going to do some creative. Speak to me how that would look, whether they go to a school such as, I'll say, St. Dominic's. I'm going to go to St. Dominic's. St. Dominic's are a provider. So how would that look? But you're walking away from the public school. It's not a school that specializes in a learning disability. I guess that's what I want to get across.
Yeah. So, and there are other examples of this too. So you can pick a school, any school. Like there are a number of religious schools that are, like St. Dominic's is one, that are providers of the Jon Peterson Scholarship. So you can go to that school, and then you can, you would meet with the financial department and the educational department of that school, and discuss how the school is able to meet the needs of your child, because you now have this, you are coming with this scholarship. Sometimes some schools will offer the option of using the scholarship for tuition, and you can pay for the tuition for that school through the Jon Peterson Scholarship. And then they will provide the services that your child needs. It's very important to find out exactly what that means. You should definitely be an informed consumer. You want to know what does that mean, that they're going to take care of the IEP? What kind of services are they actually going to get? You really want to hear that from them. So you can do it that way. You can also go, let's say you want to send your child to a school that's an independent school that's not a provider for the Jon Peterson Scholarship, then or the Autism Scholarship, same, it applies in both cases. You can do that. You can do that and accept and get the scholarship through an outside provider, and that provider can provide all the services that you need. And that can look different, depending on the setup that the school has, depending on what works for the family. But in a lot of cases, when people come to us for scholarship services, what we do is we send teachers, therapists, specialists, whatever it is that the child needs, we send that person to the school to work with the student. And then in other cases, the student gets services after school or maybe before school. There's all kinds of scenarios. So there is a lot of flexibility there in terms of the scholarship. The other important piece is that you can have multiple providers. So let's say your child is already working with a speech therapist from one agency who you like and you want to keep, but you want to send them to this private school that wants to take care of the academic pieces of the scholarship. You can do that. You can have two providers, and you can set aside, a certain amount of funding for the speech therapist and a certain amount of funding for the school. So there's really a lot of flexibility in terms of how you can play with it and how you can make it work for your child.
So one thing that we've talked about is we keep saying the scholarship, right? But there's the Autism Scholarship and there's the Jon Peterson Scholarship. speak to me about the differences, and are there differences, and how do you qualify? Can you qualify for the autism scholarship? And also, what makes you qualify for the Jon Peterson scholarship? Can you speak to the differences, and if there are differences?
Okay, so the autism scholarship is only for students who are who have the disability of autism. So you have to have that disability. It doesn't have to be a medical disability, but it has to be either an educational or medical disability of autism. The Peterson scholarship is actually for anyone who's eligible for an IEP. So it really doesn't matter what disability you have. The confusing thing is that people with autism can apply for the Jon Peterson scholarship. You can't have both. But if the reason why you might want to do that, let's say your child has autism and you apply for and then your school advises you, let's say this happens a lot, to apply for the Jon Peterson scholarship. It's usually because the school is the provider for the Peterson scholarship and not for the autism scholarship. There isn't much of a difference. The funding amount is the same. The flexibility is the same. The only difference between the autism scholarship and the Jon Peterson scholarship, which actually I think is going to be changing soon, but for right now, the only real difference is that for the autism scholarship, you are not required to take state assessments every year in order to renew. For the Jon Peterson scholarship, right now, although they may be changing it, so in a week this might be dated what I'm saying, but for right now, you do have to take state assessments in order to renew. So that right now, those are the only two differences. But you want to make sure that the provider that you want to use accept, which scholarship they accept, because obviously that's going to make a difference.
I think that's interesting because the Jon Peterson, the autism scholarship, I mean, when we started, there wasn't a Jon Peterson, right?
Right, that's right.
It didn't exist. And everyone was very leery. And Julie Billiard took the Jon Peterson, Lawrence takes it, it kind of cycled its way across our county. Linda, do you have any questions for Hadassah and Courtney regarding the autism scholarships?
I don't. I do get a lot of, we get a lot of questions about transportation with regard to the scholarship. I don't know if you have, if you deal with transportation at all with students.
I mean, we particularly don't. We don't offer that. I think you would have to go. Obviously, it would only be a provider that has that service.
Right.
But I think if you have an accommodation, or not an accommodation, but if you have a rule for transportation on your IEP, you can definitely go to a provider that does provide transportation. It's not something that A+ Solutions provides.
Okay, no problem. Well, just
Linda, do you want to add to that piece?
Yeah.
Is there something that they should know?
Sure. When you take the Jon Peterson scholarship, like Hadassah said, you're releasing the district from any obligation to provide a free appropriate public education. So they are not required, if you take the scholarship, they're not required, the school district, to provide transportation for your child with a disability. There are some exceptions to that, but they have nothing to do with your child having a disability, right? So if the school district would be obligated to provide another child who maybe goes to a private school transportation because they live within 30 minutes of the school district, this has nothing to do with your child's disability. But if the school that you've chosen as the scholarship provider is within 30 minutes bus ride of your school, your home school, where the child would have gone had you not taken them out of the public school, then the school may be responsible for providing transportation or giving you an amount, like a per diem amount, in lieu of transportation if they find that it's too hard to transport one student, for example. So that might be one way that you could still get transportation even though you're taking the scholarship. Another way is that you can use the scholarship money toward transportation if and only if transportation is marked as a needed item on the child's IEP. There's a section at the back of the IEP that talks about transportation. Does this child require specialized transportation because of their disability? If that all is checked yes, then you can use the funding toward getting transportation, for your child to that placement. But otherwise, the district has no obligation to transport a child with a disability because they have a disability through that IEP because you're releasing them from free appropriate public education. So I just wanted to throw that out there because we get a lot of questions about that.
And to bounce off that, that's a transportation and then also extended school year. Because you have said, I'm walking away from the district, you are not, the district's not required to give you extended school year. However, Courtney and Hadassah, do you want to speak to, is there ever money left over? Can that filter to the summer?
Sure. So when I meet with parents to discuss how we're going to allocate funding for the scholarship, for the student, I always bring that point up because the scholarship is actually, it starts July 1st and it ends June 30th. So it's a full year. You can use the, you can use the funding for the full calendar year, but obviously you have to, it's a finite budget. So you've got to divide it up either evenly or, kind of figure out how you're going to allocate the funds so that you don't run out if you do want to carry through to the summer. So what I usually advise parents to do is let's use the bulk of it during the school year, but save some funding for the summer. And then that way we know we're going to have some services. Families usually like to take some sort of a break in the summer. Anyway, kids need a break. And so we do less service. Usually we would do less services in the summer than we would for the rest of the school year. If you're using the scholarship, if you're applying through a school that's a provider, chances are they don't have services in the summer, but that's where that, where it's handy that you can use multiple providers, because what you can do is use, most of your scholarship, let's say at your school, but then over the summer you can take what's left and sign up with another provider and let them provide the services through the summer. But you just have to make sure you do that and you plan for that before the summer starts, because by June 30th, you have to be done with that year's funding.
So Hadassah, you brought up a good point. Whether you use an outside provider, or you use a private school that's a provider. When you talked earlier about having that conversation, that's a very important conversation to ask them. Is it for tuition? And if it is for tuition, can you be nimble and can we help expand it to the summer? Like those are very healthy and good conversations to know where your money's going, right?
Yeah,
and how you can utilize it.
Yes, with any provider you're using, whether it's a school, an agency, or a private professional, you want to understand how the money is going to be allocated and how it's going to be used, because at any point, if you decide it's your right, it's your money, even though you're not holding it, it is your money. And so at any point that you decide that your child needs something in addition, if there's funding there, you should be able to use it. But if you don't have the information, it would be kind of hard to do that. So I would request a breakdown of how that money is going to be used, just so that you have all the information and then you can plan appropriately for the year.
And I just want to add, Mary Jo, if I could, one more thing. Just because you don't have the funding, obviously you want to take full advantage of that funding amount, right? And use as much of it as possible toward your child's education. But sometimes, if you don't have the funding, you can still get the services. You would just have to private pay for it. And sometimes we do advise our clients that, it might be more beneficial for them to pay for some additional services than pay a law firm to fight or, to go through. It depends on the situation, but sometimes that's the more logical approach to say, look, we know we're right, but I'd rather pay just the extra $1,000, for a summer program and just not have to have the fight with the district and do it. So it is still possible to pay for it out of pocket. Nobody can take the money away.
And then another thing that I tell my clients that if you have, you're taking the Jon Peterson, you're going to another school, let's say we're going to Ratner, we're going to another school, you can't get the extended, you're not getting an extended school year because you're going to a different school. You have said, I'm not going to that public school. I do recommend that you still have a meeting or you look at the progress reports, because you still are going to get progress reports and determine whether your child would have qualified. And sometimes what I will have them do is actually put within the PRO1, which is the notes of the minutes of the meeting, and say, we recognize that this child is taking the Jon Peterson and is not attending the school. However, if he did attend the school, we would have provided him extended school year, just so there's a history. And let's say you go back to the public school for high school, you have a history of him qualifying for extended school year, which means that when you're back in the public school, you have a story. And that narrative shows that your child probably will qualify if that data shows that. So it's just a way to collect data and make sure you always write that down in the PRO1. So that's noted in the meeting.
Hadassah, you wanted to say something?
Sorry, I was just going to say that you touched on a very important point, Mary Jo, that I want to explain how the IEP is written, because when the school district is writing the IEP, even though they know that you're not coming to their school and that you're either going to a different private school or you're homeschooling or whatever you're doing, they're writing the IEP as if you're attending their school. So they are going to, if there's evidence to promote extended school year services, they are going to put that in, and they're going to put in whatever they would normally do in their school. And it is important to understand the difference. So oftentimes, parents will say, it says I'm supposed to get a half an hour every day of reading, or I'm supposed to get, 3 days a week of math. But if you're going to a private school and they're taking the scholarship for tuition, they're going to provide you with what they can provide you with. They should be upfront about that, and they should tell you what they're going to provide you, but they don't have to follow the IEP exactly how it's written. The IEP is written as if your child is attending the public school.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because we do get a lot of questions about that too. And you're basically saying, look, you're letting the school district off, the district of residence off the hook. You're picking a place that you feel is going to do best for your child. You've talked to the people, you've viewed what they have to offer, and you feel like they're going to present what's best for your child. So they're going to kind of use that IEP as a rough guide in terms of what they do, and they do have to provide data back to the school district on some of those things. That's part of the whole IEP scholarship process, but they are not bound by that IEP. There's no one you can point to, not the school district of residence or not the scholarship provider. You can't go to them and say, look, it says 20 minutes and you only gave me 15, or it says 20 minutes and you gave me 0. You're choosing this school because you think they're going to do right by your child. This is kind of, it's almost a formality, this IEP that's there. It's enough to get you qualified for the scholarship, but then it's up to this school that you've chosen as a provider to give your child the services that you think your child deserves. So it's just difficult.
And I'll just say that that's the benefit of using an outside independent provider that's not a private school, because then it's important to you that someone is meeting all of the goals that are on the IEP, you can ensure that happens. Because if you're working with someone privately, you'll figure that out, whether it's, if that's something that you want, then that provider is going to do that for you. So whether it's sending someone to school to do it or fitting it in after school because it just doesn't fit in the school day, that can happen. So that's one of the benefits of using an outside provider.
Where would you find that list? The list of providers?
So if you go to the Ohio Department of Education and you search under Jon Peterson, you can ask for a list of providers on, like, in your county. Let's say if you live in Cuyahoga County, you can search for all the providers in Cuyahoga County, and it will give you a list of everyone. And you can go through them and you can click on them, and it'll give you a general idea of what they do. And you can always call or email a provider and find out more. Ask for a meeting. I'm sure most providers will sit down with you and talk to you about all the things that they provide and how they can help meet your child's needs.
Thank you. Does anyone want to post a question? I think we've gone through a lot. I'm trying to think of something in the scholarship that we didn't touch upon. What did we not touch on, Hadassah? Courtney, what did I miss?
Well, there's only one thing that I want to add. But I do think there's some questions in the chat. I don't know if we covered them all. I haven't been watching, but I know that there are a few. But one thing I wanted to add, because Linda, when you were talking about transportation, if your child, let's say your child didn't qualify for speech through the public school when they did the ETR, and so there's no speech services on your IEP, but you know that there's an issue there and you feel that your child needs that service. As long as the provider can back it up with some data. So if they do an evaluation, they do their own evaluation for speech, and they feel that, yes, your child could benefit from speech therapy, the provider can add a service. Now, they might not be able to add something like transportation because you can't ask the district to do that, but it could be something like speech or OT, or maybe some academic services that your student wasn't found eligible for from the district. The provider can provide an evaluation and some data to prove that that is something that the child actually needs, and you're allowed to provide it. So when we've done that for many students who, maybe were like just too high to qualify for speech or OT, or didn't have writing goals on their IEP, but really are weak in writing, and the parents want them to improve in that, because it's your choice as the parent. It's your choice, within reason, but it's your choice of how you want to use that funding.
So you're recommending that, let's say my child didn't qualify for speech, but I know that there's a speech deficit. So I would have an assessment done outside. I would have an evaluation, and that progress would happen. I'd be collecting data, that speech therapist would be collecting data. And then I would go back to the district and say, I have this information. I would like to amend the IEP. And this is why I want to add a speech goal.
Right, so that's an option, but you can do something even easier than that. And it won't become part of the IEP, but it still can be part of something that the provider offers, which is you can just have the provider do an evaluation and set up goals. And all you have to do as the provider is submit the new goals, the explanation for, why you came to that conclusion, and you submit that to the OD. Like I would submit that to the ODE, and then the service becomes approved, and it's another service that you can provide. It won't necessarily be recorded in the child's official IEP that the district wrote. They won't necessarily be looking for those goals. The provider can comment on them on the progress report. Once you've added them, it'll come up in the progress report, and the provider can comment on them, but the district may choose to ignore that if they want to. They don't have to, consider that when they're writing the next IEP, but that is something that you can do. And you don't necessarily have to go through the amendment process. You can, but you don't have to.
And the funds will cover that.
Yes, the funds will cover that.
So that's the benefit of the scholarship, right? Is so you can avoid having to have a debate with the district anymore. You don't agree on something. You don't agree that they're offering your child what your child needs, or that they can deliver what your child needs. So you're putting that aside and you're moving on to a new place and trusting them to do it. So.
That's right. That's right.
And I think your services are so unique, really. They've saved a lot of our clients for sure that, want to use the scholarship but don't, and have the school that they've chosen doesn't accept the scholarship. Mm-hmm. So I know some schools, and then we've talked about this when I was looking up my Jon Peterson stuff, I'm sorry, but have you talked about the uniqueness of your program where you can kind of go into the schools sometimes and deliver services there versus meeting somewhere else? Because I think that's so cool when schools are willing to let you guys in the door so that the students can get the services within their day. Can you talk about that? Explain how you do that?
Sure. I mean, that is, that's the ideal way to do it, is to bring the intervention specialist or the reading specialist or the OT into the school and provide the service there. And the reason why that's so helpful is because not only does your child get the services when they need it, like during the school day and when they're fresher, versus after school, but it's also that the provider can then have conversations and collaboration with the classroom teachers, with the school team, whoever's working with your child. So it can be a more comprehensive intervention. It's always better when interventions are not in a vacuum, but when they're more comprehensive. And so if you're working with the school team, you can really accomplish that. Most schools will allow outside providers in if they don't accept the scholarship. If it's a school that's a provider, that's a different story. And you have to talk to them and ask them if they're comfortable with bringing an outside provider because, you feel your child needs a service. But there are schools that allow it. It just really depends. It's completely case by case, but it is a benefit.
Yeah. And I think that's a learning curve for the school. So Hadassah is in Beechwood, and correct me if I'm wrong, Hadassah, 7 years ago, Jesu, which is in University Heights, would have never allowed her in the building. Now she's on direct dial. Now the principal is calling her like, I need you. I have a student who is just qualified. I need a reading intervention. I need math intervention. Who do you have that can come in? But 7 years ago, it probably was more difficult for you
Sure. I mean, it took time for everyone to understand the scholarship, to understand how it works, how it's okay. You know, no one wants to think that they're doing something that's not okay, not legit and not legal. It's a learning curve, you know, like anything else. It was new. I mean, it's still relatively new, right? And so people were just learning about it. But we really do send teachers and therapists to many different schools, and it's worked really well.
Yeah, I think
I'm sorry, go ahead.
especially these, non-public religious schools maybe have smaller budgets and don't, have the funding for that. So a lot of schools appreciate when we can send in the speech therapist or the OT or somebody that they don't have, even on staff to help these students. So I think a lot of schools like that we can come in and do that.
Right.
And it's great. I mean, I think sometimes it's a scheduling issue that the reasons that we hear why they don't want to come in, there isn't a period in the day that the student, especially if they get older, right? And they have more classes they have to fill. There isn't a period of the day where they can have somebody come in to do OT or speech. But if you can build it in or work with the school to kind of change their requirements a little bit to allow that during the day, it helps the students so much, because sometimes depending on the student, they can feel like they're being punished or forced to do more work if they have to do the whole school day and then they come home and they have to go to a private session somewhere else. If that's the only way to do it, great, you got to do it, you have to get it in. But if you can incorporate it into their day so that when they come home, they can relax or do their homework and then relax like the rest of the students, then that's ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've found creative ways of doing that. Either some schools have study hall periods, or sometimes there are electives that really the student doesn't, they think they need to take, but they don't really need to take. So we found creative ways around doing that so that they're not missing any core classes. Because the last thing you want to do is pull them out of a core class that they're going to be responsible for to give them a different service. That's really not going to be helpful. So
I think another piece where it really is helpful is collecting data. That's real-time experience, and you're with those teachers and you're showing the teachers, okay, we're doing reading instruction and this is the data collecting tool I'm using. What are you using? So now it's more comprehensive. Now it's more thorough. It's real-time, collect the data at that real time, at that real moment of support that you're able now to give back to the Ohio Board of Education to see, to continue that process.
Right. And especially if you're seeing this child one-on-one, but a lot of issues sometimes come up when they're within a group. And you won't necessarily ever know that as the therapist or the interventionist. You may never really get to see the issues that the child's exhibiting in school if you're not in school. So it's actually really, really, really helpful for everyone.
So a question that we just got, and I read it real quick, so I hope I get this one right. It's about the county where you live. Do you speak to where you live and the provider? How does that work? Do you have to live in the county?
No, you don't have to live in the same county. Obviously, it makes it easier if you're not like, hundreds of miles away, but no, you don't have to. We send people out kind of all over. And now that everyone's so savvy with Zoom, it's actually really easy. Most kids are pretty good with it. So we can even set something up that way. So let's say the reading specialist that you want to see is, on the other side of town. You can, work with your school. The provider can work with your school to set up a time where maybe you're Zooming in with your interventionists, or same thing where if you want to do it after school, if you can't travel to that location, you can do it online. So there's lots of different ways to do that.
I do want to make it clear that this is an Ohio thing. So if you talk to friends that live in other states, and they're going to say, what are you talking about? What's the Jon Peterson and what's the Autism Scholarship? So if you're somebody who lives on the border of Pennsylvania and Ohio and you're looking at a provider, that's not going to work. But it within Ohio, you're fine, whatever county it is.
Yeah.
And Jon Peterson, he was a real person, right? He was the founder of starting the Autism Scholarship, and then branched off and thought, why aren't we helping more kids with other disabilities? And then this branched off. So he was a real person. He actually recently just passed away.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't feel that the public school was meeting his child's needs, and that's why he started.
It's kind of cool. So we have 10 minutes left. I want to utilize everyone's time. If anyone can think of a question and they want to throw it in our little chat box, we'd love to answer it. Any final thoughts, Courtney, Hadassah, that you'd like to share with us?
No, I don't think so. If I would just say one thing that's, super, super important is, really research who you're using as your provider, and really find out, and if it's a school, find out what they're going to do to service your child. It's great to get tuition paid for, but find out what they're doing to meet the needs, the special service needs of your child.
Great point. Great
I would
point.
say also depending where you are in the process, if you are, in the middle of that testing process and let's say your child already attends a non-public school, you can have someone from that non-public school come to those meetings. That's really helpful because they're the ones who are seeing your child every day where the public school isn't because they're already enrolled in a non-public school. So if you could have someone from your non-public come to those meetings, bring that data and talk about, your child in the school setting, that would be really helpful.
So we have one, do you see that question about the,
It was a comment, yeah. Somebody had checked with ODE and there were no providers in their county, so they wanted to make sure that they could go to another county, so yeah.
Yeah, so you can, definitely.
okay. So there we have it. We have the Jon Peterson Scholarship and the Autism Scholarship. You have, what I've taken away is that you have control and do your research and ask questions. When Hadassah and I were talking about doing this tea talk, we were both kind of like, well, do you think people need to know? Doesn't everybody know? Hadassah and I, we've been talking this language for so long, we forget that new parents don't know.
Right.
And people that move to Ohio don't know. And it can be confusing. But ask questions. Know that A+ Solution is there for you. Know that Hickman and Louder, we're here for you. And if anyone has additional questions, we'd love to answer them.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today. We really appreciate your time and we hope this was helpful for you. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming today.
Thanks, Courtney and Hadassah. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.